Hello there, welcome to another episode of the Allotment Dram. This is a series of short videos where we sit and talk about different whiskies in the surroundings of our North London allotment. You join me here on what's been a lovely afternoon, sort of mid-February, and bright blue sky, that milky, wintry sort of sunshine. A little bit cold, but perfectly fine for getting on with one or two jobs up here, so not too bad at all. But of course, while that's all very interesting, I'm sure you didn't come to tune into this video to hear me talk about the weather in North London or what I've been up to, but of course you tuned in to hear about some whiskey. What is today's Allotment Dram, I hear you ask? Well, it's from a very famous distillery, one of the best-selling single malt distilleries in Scotland, and it is the Laphroaig 10 years old sherry cask finish. So this is a relatively new addition to the core range of Laphroaig. Came out 18 months, 2 years ago roughly, and of course Laphroaig is a very famous distillery, as I say. Sits within the top 5 in terms of single malt sales, and by far the biggest selling in this sort of Islay whiskey single malt peaty smoky category. There's sells last count was something like 4 million bottles a year, which is, considering it is very bold, very peaty, very smoky, that's amazing. And as I say, sits actually in 5th place in the top 5 of all Scotch single malts, with only Glenfiddich, Glenlivet, Macallan and Glenmorangie above it actually. So very, very popular and has been for a very long time. Was originally founded in 1815 with 2 brothers called Alexander and Donald Johnson, and really, sort of in the last sort of 2 or 3 decades, it's really come into its own and forged ahead of its competition to take this first place as the best-selling Islay single malt. So what can I tell you about this, the Laphroaig 10 years old sherry cask finish? Well, as I said, this is a recent addition to the core range, and what it really is a slightly higher strength version of the 10-year-old. So this whiskey follows the track of that classic 10-year-old for much of its life, and then for the last 12 to 18 months it gets put into Oloroso sherry casks for a finishing period. So essentially for, let's say, 8.5 or 9 years, it is the same as that classic 10-year-old which you see everywhere, and is the one that really drives all of those sales. What percentage of those 4 million bottles of the 10-year-old, it's going to be high percentage. But then for the last sort of year to year and a half, it goes into these Oloroso sherry casks for a finish, and it's also bottled a little bit higher, so 48%, and it also costs a bit more. So I guess you're paying for the higher strength and the fact they're using the sherry casks, which is slightly unusual in itself in Laphroaig. It tends to work very well in the old bourbon casks. There's 1 or 2 with sherry cask influence, like the Lore, if you've Lore, which is sort of towards the top of the range. So if you've ever had that has some quite significant sherry cask influence, but otherwise it really is bourbon cask the whole way. So I guess you're paying a bit more for the sherry cask, and you're paying a bit more for 48% versus 40. So this comes in around 60 to 65 pounds a bottle. Depends on where you shop, of course, but I think that's probably quite enough chat. So I think we should have a taste. I've actually fished out my Laphroaig. Don't know if you can see that Laphroaig glass that I picked up at the distillery in 2014. I thought it's kind of deserved it for this. So here we go. Ooh, look at the colour there. Lovely colour. This sort of dark, much darker than the regular 10, which obviously is just the bourbon cask, so it has a lovely sort of golden, quite vibrant yellow colour. Whereas this, you can see, has this sort of much darker, coppery, amber sort of tones, which you classically get with decent sherry casks. So let's have a smell and a taste. So of course I can smell bonfire. I've got my little fire burning away in the background there to try and get rid of some some sort of rubbish and bits and bobs that I've cut down, so naturally getting bonfire, but it's there anyway. Lots of peat smoke, and then a sort of, it's like a bit of honey actually, quite a nice like manuka honey, and yeah, like a seaweed, a bit mossy, seaweedy, bonfire like. Anyway, let's have a taste. Wow, this is immediately got a really sort of punchy quality to it. Extra strength, really giving it some grip and like a great mouthfeel actually. Lovely, but this sort of like peppery peat smoke coming through, that sort of seaweed, you know, like when you get when it's still a bit damp but the tide's going out, so it's sort of drying out. Yeah, definitely that honey coming through, and also this sort of mossy, earthy quality as well. Yeah, very, very nice. Really nice actually. Really nice addition, because you know I like the classic. You know, a lot of people run the classic 10-year-old down because it's so popular and because it's at 40% and it's, you know, quite basic. But you know, I love that. It's one of the smoky whiskies that made me understand what smoky whiskey was about actually. So yeah, I've always liked it, so I was very pleased to see that they brought this sort of version out as well. But let's have another taste. So what is a sherry cask giving on top of all those other things that I've mentioned? You've definitely got some caramel, you've definitely got some raisins. Almost feels like when you soak raisins in like whiskey or cognac or something, maybe before you make like a fruit cake or Christmas cake or Christmas pudding, something like that. You've also got a sort of nuttiness to it as well. It's like a hazelnut, like toasted hazelnut. There's definitely some candied orange peel in there as well. All on top of this layer of like peat smoke, damp seaweed, the earthy, mossy sort of quality, the bonfire. It's really like the ashes of the bonfire, you know, the embers. And then there's a sort of, now quite late, I'm getting like a sort of slightly salty, briny quality with a hint of like a couple of drips of iodine. You know, that sort of medicinal sort of edge that people always say you get with, you know, good Islay whiskies always have this slightly medicinal edge. So yeah, really, really good actually. Very good. You know, whether it's worth spending, you know, the regular 10 is about £30–35 most places. Whether it's worth spending, you know, £30 more than that, only you can decide. But I mean, I would say, yeah, this is a very, very good whiskey. You know, quite exquisite actually, because you've still got that huge peat smoke that you get with Laphroaig. You know, there's no getting away from it. But on top of that, you've got this extra layer of what the sherry cask is giving. It's giving you this sweetness. It's giving you this sort of wonderful richness, boldness, and the two things marry together really nicely. So yeah, wow, really, really good. Very glad that I managed to pick up a bottle of this. So I think I'll let you get on doing whatever you were doing before you found this video, and we'll say goodbye for now from the allotments. I've got one or two other things to do before I sort of pop off home, but from myself and the Laphroaig 10-year-old sherry cask finish, we will bid you farewell, and we hope to see you for the next Allotment Dram another time. Cheers!